We were 2 hours into the hike before I started to feel that doubt creeping in. A faint itch at the back of my mind that I couldn't quite shake. I don't think it was the trail itself. No, the trail was picturesque. Tall pines swaying around me. The faint chirp of distant birds mixed with the crunch of our boots created this symphony of nature that I'd usually find calming. But on this hike, something just felt different about it. It was off, and I couldn't put my finger on why. Garrett was up ahead of me, whistling some tuneless melody, his oversized backpack bouncing against his rump. Haley followed behind him, all smiles and sunny optimism as she swatted at a few mosquitoes. Meanwhile, I trailed behind both of them, trying not to let my unease show. "This better be worth it," Garrett called back, stopping briefly to adjust his backpack. "If this hot spring is just a puddle in the dirt, I'm blaming you." "It's supposed to be amazing," Haley chimed in. "The gas station guy said the locals swear by it. Super secret and super worth it." "Yeah, secret enough that we might not ever find it," I muttered under my breath. That hike was easy enough at the start. Well-marked trails and a handful of other hikers nodding those polite greetings as we passed by. Some had towels slung over their shoulders or swimsuits peeking out from beneath their hiking gear, encouraging signs that we were on the right track. But after we reached the fork in the path, things got murky. The wooden signpost at the split was faded, almost illegible. Arrows pointed in either direction, equally unhelpful. Garrett bent down and squinted at it, muttering, "Left goes..." "What?" "Towards the gorge? And the right is... Hot Springs?" "I think right," I offered, though I wasn't entirely sure. Something felt right about going right, though. The clerk at the gas station had been pretty specific. "Take the right at the bend. You'll know when you see it." This had to be what he was talking about. "Are you sure?" Haley asked, brushing her ponytail off her neck. She looked between the two paths, uncertainty showing immediately on her face. "Pretty sure," I said, more confident than I actually felt. "I mean, it matches what the guy said, right?" Garrett shrugged. "Right it is." The three of us turned down the right-hand path. The air grew thicker as the trees closed in. The trail became a lot less maintained here, and the further we went, the quieter it seemed to get. No more birdsong, no distant laughter from other hikers, just us, and the rhythmic crunch of our boots. "You notice how we haven't seen anybody else for a while now?" Haley said, breaking the silence. "Probably just because it's off-season," Garrett replied, though he didn't sound too convinced. I didn't respond. My gut did tell me something wasn't adding up, but I kept my mouth shut. The last thing I wanted to be right now was the paranoid one. Besides, we'd heard the sound of rushing water earlier, probably a creek feeding into the springs. We had to be close. Still, the trees felt closer now, their branches almost like they were clawing at the sky. We passed the remnants of an old marker, its wood rotted through, the lettering completely obscured. It might have said something important once upon a time, but now, it was just another sign that we were far from the well-trodden trails. "Okay, do you think we should just turn back?" Haley said. Garrett laughed, though it sounded forced. "What, and admit defeat? Nah, we gotta keep going. Hot Springs or bust." I just nodded, forcing myself to push that doubt aside again. That clerk had been clear. The right path was the right way. The trail narrowed as we moved deeper into the forest, and the further we went, the more out of place we continued to feel. Gone were the occasional trail markers, replaced instead by moss-covered rocks and patches of mud that sucked at our boots. The air carried a damp chill now, and every now and again a low rustling sound came from somewhere just out of sight. Each time it happened, I would quickly tell myself, "It's nothing. It's the wind. It's a squirrel. Something harmless." but that feeling in my gut would not go away. Okay, I know I sound like a broken record here, but anybody else starting to feel like this is a giant mistake? Haley asked. She was glancing over her shoulder, expecting to see something, or someone, behind us. No, Garrett said, though his tone betrayed his words. He shifted his pack higher on his shoulders and kept forging ahead. Look, we've come this far, right? We've got to be near the spring soon enough. Let's just keep going. Not long after, we did hear a faint rushing sound, quickly growing louder with each step. It wasn't the soothing gurgle I'd imagined for a hot spring, but a steady roar of a creek. When we reached it, the water wasn't steaming or inviting. It was icy cold, crashing over jagged rocks jutting from the surface. Okay, this can't be right, Haley murmured, crouching by the edge. She trailed her fingers in the water for just a moment before pulling back sharply. Water is water, Garrett said. We've got to be close. Let's just keep following it. I don't think any of us wanted to admit how wrong it all was. The trail, if you could even call it that anymore, wound around the creek's edge. The trees overhead were so dense now that the sunlight barely pierced through. When we stumbled across the camp, it didn't really hit me at first what it was. Piles of trash were scattered across the clearing, beer cans, torn sleeping bags, and something that looked like a melted cooler. It smelled faintly of mildew and something else, sharp and acidic. Looks like somebody's been squatting here, Garrett said, kicking an empty chip bag. This is gross, Haley muttered, her face scrunched up in disgust. She nudged a soggy, wet t-shirt with the toe of her boot. Who leaves this kind of mess in the middle of nowhere? We continued to poke around, and I noticed something strange. No signs of a fire pit, no cooking gear, nothing practical, just trash. Like somebody decided to dump their entire life here and just leave. Or maybe they hadn't left at all. My thought was immediately cut short when we heard voices. They drifted through the trees, faint but growing louder by the second. Laughter, high and manic, followed by bursts of incomprehensible chatter. Garrett stiffened, his hand tightening around the strap of his pack. Haley looked at me, her eyes wide. Other hikers? She whispered, though the look on her face said she didn't believe it. Could be, I said, though I didn't believe it either. Those voices grew louder, and then we saw them. A group of people stumbling down the creek toward us. They were half naked, their clothes in tatters, with streaks of dirt and something darker smeared across their skin. In front was a wiry man with wild hair, bobbing his head to some music that he seemed to be the only one listening to. Behind him, a woman spun in circles, arms raised like she was in a trance of her own. "What the hell?" Garrett whispered. "Hey," I called out, forcing a smile that felt brittle. "We're, looking for the hot springs. Are we close by chance?" The man stopped. The others behind him went still, their movements ceasing as if somebody had flipped a switch. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then the man tilted his head. "Hot springs?" he said, voice a low drawl. He looked back at the others, and a ripple of laughter spread throughout them. "Boring old people," one of them muttered. "Always looking for lame shit," another hissed. "Okay, we should go," Haley said under her breath, taking a step backward. "No kidding. Yeah, let's do it," Garrett muttered, already turning. We didn't wait for a proper goodbye. I threw in one last glance over my shoulder as we started back down the trail. The group was still watching us, faces unreadable, bodies unnervingly still. But as we rounded the bend, the faint sound of footsteps told me they hadn't stayed still after all. "They're following us," I whispered. "Just keep moving," Garrett said. "Don't look back." But I couldn't help it. Every now and again I stole glances behind me, catching glimpses of movement in the trees, shadows darting between trunks. They weren't walking exactly. They were more like slinking, their movements almost animalistic. Just our luck, to not only take a wrong turn, but to also find a bunch of druggy burnouts in the process. The trail we'd followed earlier was barely visible now, swallowed up by the forest. Garrett was leading us off the path entirely, cutting through the undergrowth in a desperate attempt to lose them. Branches whipped at my face. My legs burned as we scrambled over fallen logs and through tangled brush. "Do you think they're dangerous?" Haley said. "Does it matter?" "Let's just keep moving," Garrett shot back. The sound of them continued to grow, a cacophony of laughter and rustling leaves. The panic was rising, threatening to choke me. My mind raced with half-formed thoughts. Who were they? What did they want? But none of that mattered. We needed to get away. Finally, we broke through the trees and stumbled onto the trail again. The fork loomed ahead of us, and without thinking, we took the left path this time, the one we should have taken the whole time. The sound of water grew louder, and for a moment, I thought we'd finally lost them. But then from somewhere behind us came a long whooping call, echoing around like a hunter's cry. "They're not giving up," Haley gasped out, her face pale. "No," I said, my throat dry. "They're not." That left-hand path was an overgrown mess, barely more than a suggestion of a trail winding through the underbrush. Branches continued to snag our clothes. The ground was uneven beneath our feet. But we didn't stop. We couldn't. Behind us, that hollering laughter grew louder and louder. I felt like they were everywhere at once, like the forest was conspiring to funnel us back into their grasp. "Just keep going," Garrett barked, his voice strained. He wasn't whistling anymore, wasn't cracking jokes. His face was set in grim determination as he plowed ahead. Haley was sobbing softly, her breaths hitching as she stumbled along. My own panic continued to bubble up, but I swallowed it down, focusing on my footing. One wrong step, one twisted ankle, and we're done for. The sound of water continued to grow, the steady rush of it cutting through the chaos. I clung to that sound like a lifeline, praying it meant we were close to the springs now. Maybe there were other people there, normal hikers, anybody who could help us. "They're faster than us," Haley said, clutching my arm. "They're going to catch us." "No, they're not," I lied, pushing her forward. "We're almost there." We broke through the tree line and into a clearing. The hot spring spread out before us, a series of steaming pools carved into the rocky terrain, their surfaces shimmering in the pale light. The smell of sulfur hung heavy in the air, and for the first time in what felt like hours, I heard something other than the whooping and hollering of our pursuers. Laughter, normal laughter, and the low hum of conversation. There were people here, families, couples lounging by the water, towels spread out on the rocks. I even heard a dog bark somewhere nearby. We stumbled into that clearing like refugees, our clothes torn, our faces streaked with dirt. Heads turned, curious, concerned, as we collapsed on the rocks, gasping for air. Haley was openly crying now, her hands shaking as she clung to Garrett. I scanned the edge of the forest, expecting them to come bursting out immediately after us. But there was nothing. Just the quiet rustle of leaves, and the distant roar of the creek. "They stopped," Garrett said. "They're not following us anymore." Even as he said it, I still couldn't believe it. My eyes continued to dart back to the tree line, searching for any sign of movement. And I saw them. There they were, just beyond the edge of the clearing. Pale faces, barely visible through the foliage. They were crouched low. That wiry man from before was at the front. Hollow eyes locked on us. He raised a hand, and for a moment I thought he was going to wave, but instead he did a sharp, slicing motion across his throat. I froze, my breath catching in my chest. One by one, the others melted back into the forest, their forms vanishing into the shadows, like they'd never been there at all. The clearing was too quiet now, the normalcy of it a jarring contrast to the nightmare we just barely escaped from. "You see them anymore?" I whispered. Garrett and Haley looked at me. They hadn't seen anything, or maybe they just didn't want to. "We should just go," Haley said. "I'm not staying here." But where would we go? Back through the forest? Back past them? That thought was unbearable. For now, the hot springs were the safest place we could be, surrounded by strangers whose presence felt like a shield. We hung out there for the rest of the day, enjoying the area but still constantly looking over our shoulders. Some of the other folks there explained they had indeed kicked those party kids out of the springs area, and they were still in the area and still bitter. It didn't surprise them one bit to hear our story. No one had any trouble hiking back to the parking lot, including us. They turned out to be a lot of bark and very little bite. Thank God.